Welcome to Conscious and Curious with Crystal Schultz, where we deep dive into the questions and mysteries of life. We learn through the personal stories of individuals and topics such as philosophy, esoteric truths, wellness, religion, and spirituality. With meaningful conversations and thought-provoking ideas, we'll learn together and hopefully inspire consciousness and intentional living. Let's dive in. Hi, and welcome to this episode of Conscious and Curious with Crystal Schultz. I'm Crystal, your host, and today we're diving into OCD and the positive and negative ego. Just a quick reminder, I am a yogic life coach, Kundalini yoga instructor, and numerologist. My passion is to help people to live lives they love and achieve their desires, but also to just stop merely surviving, but to also start leading lives in authenticity and self-authority. I also love the philosophical deep dive, which is why we are here. I wanted to cover this topic today because I personally have struggled with OCD throughout my life. And the more I've learned about it and discussed it with other people, I'm finding it's a very common issue and related to a very basic human need. So I wanted to explore it more, also in terms of yogic philosophy. And in another series of episodes, I'll be diving into an interesting subcategory that I was also personally dealing with called scrupulosity or religious OCD. If you have struggled with scrupulosity and are willing to share your story, please reach out to me. I'm currently doing interviews right now as of summer of 2025. And feel free to email me at consciousandcuriouswithcrystal@gmail.com or message me on Instagram. And if you have enjoyed or appreciated the podcast episodes you've heard so far, please subscribe, leave a review, or share with somebody who needs to hear. All right, let's get started. I'm going to share a bit of my story and experience here. As I've said, this has been a struggle for me throughout my life, and I honestly believed that nearly everyone functioned the same way I did. I didn't know I had OCD, but pre-thinking and overthinking everything was a constant, and having constant compulsions in my life to try to feel safe or control what was happening around me. That was also very common. I think because I was a very sensitive child, it also made me feel extra aware of my surroundings and the feelings of people around me and my own feelings, and that made me crave certainty even more. I struggled with some regular OCD, like constant counting and repetitive behavior, a slight germophobia, not too extreme, but the highest on my list was scrupulosity, perfectionism, and people pleasing. Actually, I'll share with you a list of most of my OCDs. And this is quite vulnerable, but actually, this is pretty therapeutic for me as well, just to share with others. So here's my list: people pleasing, perfectionism, scrupulosity or religious OCD, trying to control what others think of me, dermatillomania or skin picking disorder, avoiding being misunderstood, making sure I never lock my keys in my car, locking it over and over, finding the one truth that everybody should follow for happiness, keeping people from experiencing pain, keeping people from noticing my compulsions. Some of these are much worse than others, but they all have affected my life. And many of them I've been able to heal, which I'll get into later, but it's still a process for me. I remember a time when I was about 10, walking down the sidewalk to my house. There's lines or breaks in the sidewalk, right? So I would avoid stepping on them because they would induce bad luck. Something bad would happen if I did. And at the same time, I could only take so many steps in each square of sidewalk. So now my stride is controlled and part of the compulsion. It was usually 2 steps in each square, but with short kids' legs, I really need like 2.5 steps. But I would just stretch myself more and do 2 because 3 was an odd number, probably unlucky. Just this was the cycle of my brain. And I would be counting my steps and trying to land on an even number by the time I got to the end of the road. This was my compulsion for trying to enforce what I called good luck as a kid. But really, it was certainty. The other thing my overactive mind was juggling was that I did not want to be seen as too different, or crazy, or awkward. So my other compulsion was not to let people see or notice my compulsions, which really did a number on my mind and my nervous system. So here I am trying to walk in a specific pattern, and if I don't, then I'll be first, or have to go back and do it again, or walk longer around my house to make it count, and all to appease who? The luck gods? I don't know. Really, it was my form of trying to control the uncontrollable. I may have been triggered because somebody couldn't play, or I was possibly just bored, something as simple as that. Or I may have just had anxiety over having what I termed bad luck, which in all likeliness was just what I felt was a lack of control. Another time, I was at the kitchen counter as a teenager getting ready to split a treat with somebody. I really hated this practice and felt the anxiety rising because my entire life I would pick the smaller piece, proof of my piety and trying to earn my salvation. And when the other person would ask, "What piece do you want?" I would tense up. Was it so wrong to want the bigger piece? I always gave up the bigger piece and I wanted it. But wait, wasn't the very want a sign of my greed and selfishness? I must purge that so that I can live in heaven forever and never be separated from my family. Be ye therefore perfect, even as I am, the scripture said. Pick the smaller piece, I would say in my mind. See, you'll never be perfect. What you want isn't right. See, that was the proof. You really need to work harder. You're so selfish. You're definitely going to hell. Sacrifice so that you know you'll be okay ish. Remember, sacrifice brings forth blessings. And also, you can't let them know that you're selfish. So don't hesitate when you say you want the smaller piece. And if you do hesitate, they're going to think that you really want the bigger piece and they're going to try to give you the bigger piece, but you got to make sure they get the bigger piece. In the end, I would say I wanted the smaller piece with a little smile, then would be hit again with the battle once I hear, "No, no, no, you should take the bigger piece," my friend would say. Were they going through the same thing in their mind? Were they really wanting the bigger piece, but trying to sacrifice their salvation? Were they actually being generous? Did they really not care? I don't know. I couldn't risk it. I had to be generous. I had to give up more. "No, really, I want this one," I would say. "If you're sure," they would say. Sigh of semi relief. The decision over, but I still had proof I was bad. I was still selfish. I still wanted more. I would have confessed to someone if I'd grown up Catholic, but Mormons don't consider something like this confession worthy. And my other compulsion was to make sure that people didn't think badly of me, especially church leadership. Most of my experience, though, is so tied up in nearly every second of every day that it's hard to pinpoint certain OCD experiences. It was my entire life, such as rehearsing things I would talk about before going out where I knew I would be with other people. Even with this podcast, it's actually really healing for me to have it recorded and online where everyone can hear it and I'm not going to go back and edit it. The compulsion to avoid being misunderstood keeps me wanting to not make it public until it's perfect and only full of perfectly true statements. Of course, I'll always admit that I can be wrong, but normally I wouldn't put something in the public space because I could be misunderstood. And the other compulsion is to make certain that people understand what I really mean. But all of this, the compulsions, overthinking, the daily interruptions, really shifted for me when I began my journey into Kundalini yoga. And for your information, there are many, many types of yoga. Kundalini is just one branch of many, but encompasses most of the different kinds of yoga, like meditation, moving your body, mantra, and so forth. I was led to Kundalini yoga, and it's the one I know very well. So I will tell you my experience. One of my core thoughts that motivated my triggers and compulsions, especially the religious ones that are tied to the perfectionistic ones, was that inherently I was never going to be good enough. This was reinforced by the Mormon or Christian doctrine of the natural man, as in the Mosiah scripture in the Book of Mormon. The natural man is an enemy to God. And all the teachings that go along with how we are creatures who are easily tempted, prone to evil if we don't cling to the teachings in the scriptures and the words of the prophets, thus we will be in sin, pain, uncertainty, etc. Like the line in Come Thou Fount. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Although I still love that hymn. But I definitely don't feel the same way about any of this philosophy. Well, I'm going to go back here a little bit. I believe it was around 2017 or 18 that I had a beautiful new friend in my neighborhood who was in a Kundalini yoga teacher training. And part of her course was to practice teaching. So she offered some free classes and asked if I'd come support her. I thought it was interesting, but mostly I wanted to support. So I went to her class. But after the first meditation, something shifted in me. There was a release, a peace that I felt. And to clarify, I was a young mom of four at the time and literally at the end of my rope. For years at this point, depression had been a constant companion, And I began having anxiety with my last pregnancy, and it was not going away. Suicidal thoughts had been a constant background noise since I was a teenager and only exacerbated by postpartum depression. We were also financially struggling, had some other issues in our family that I won't share here, but I was given a tiny glimpse of peace, a small sliver of light to my soul. And it was like I had been drowning for years without the relief of death when I felt finally this lightness, and I knew there was something special here. It took a little while and a very direct message from the divine that I needed to make this a priority in my life. And so, even though it was a big inconvenience to my family at the time, mostly because of the time away from them and my children were small, I made it a priority to go to yoga twice a week, once to my friend's class and once to the class that she attended. And for a couple days after each class, I'd be able to hold that relief, light. I'd even say that truth that I was learning and I was getting in touch now with my true self. One of the most healing paradigm shifts for me was that my true self was whole, beautiful, and perfect already, with nothing to prove, nothing to earn. It was the essence of me that was in constant divine communication. And it was really just my mind and thoughts, triggers and traumas getting in the way of my peace. And those can be healed. I was doing that. I was doing that work with Kundalini yoga. And so I kept going, eventually making it to teacher training, which really, really changed my life. And eventually, through consistent practice, I've gained a peaceful life. Peace like I didn't think I'd ever be able to find until the next life, as I was taught in church. Now, I believe that heaven and hell are both here. Well, I've experienced both here, and I live with so much more peace and joy and contentment like never before. I no longer have anxiety, depression, or suicidal thoughts, nor have I since 2019, the year of my teacher training. And gratefully, the OCD is nearly gone. There's still some residual I'm working on, but most of it is gone now. And I would like to add, though, that I had also participated in therapy here and there over the years. And I know that it's a valuable resource if you can find a therapist that's matched for you. However, FYI, I was never treated specifically for OCD, but I do highly recommend therapy. So let's get into some more specifics. What is OCD? I'm not going to do too much on the side of explaining the details of OCD here because we'll get into that in another episode with life coach Jill Freestone and possibly some others. I really wanted to share a little of my experience and to share some of the insights related to spiritualism and philosophy. So, OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder. In simple terms, OCD is a mental health disorder characterized by intrusive and unwanted thoughts or obsessions and repetitive behaviors or mental acts or compulsions that are aimed at managing the anxiety caused by those obsessions. The obsessions and compulsions can significantly interfere with a person's daily life, causing distress and impairment in a lot of areas. So there's a trigger, situation, or thought, which creates the obsession or need for control, aka certainty, which then leads to a compulsive act to manage the anxiety, act or thought or something like that, right? That's fairly common for a lot of people, but specifically if it is impeding your daily life, then it's more officially OCD. Most people think OCD is just characterized by excessive hand washing or checking the locks 20 times, but those are not the only ways they show up, and many are far more subtle. So much so that most people don't even realize they have OCD. An insight I had during my research and through my experience is that need for control is really a need for certainty. I used to call myself a control freak, and then I realized I'm actually a certainty freak. I read this quote that was spot on. It didn't say who it was by, so I'm sorry for not crediting. When the mind says, I need certainty, it's really your emotional brain saying, I need safety. And as safety is one of our most basic human needs, it makes sense that certainty is compelling and could create OCD patterns. This is why I find religion so fascinating as well, because while I like many things about religion and think it has great influence in, there's many ways, I can't help but notice that religion sells one thing particularly well: certainty. If you have a fear of death or what happens after life, religion has an answer. If you have a fear of where you stand with God, religion will tell you, typically through a checklist or authority figures. If you have a fear of the future, religion has prophecy to tell you what will happen and how to prepare. Do you see what I mean? I'm not trying to disparage religion as a whole. I've seen many benefits from it and I've received many benefits from it. But to an OCD mind, can you see the issue? It can create certainty issues and compulsions. Worse still, the mental gymnastics that come from trying to appease each of the certainties offered, such as having to qualify for the certainty by paying money or not having bad thoughts or never sinning or repenting constantly. From morning rituals to weekly and monthly rituals, what you should or should not do in every situation, being prepared for natural disasters and the second coming, and there's so many things that can apply here. This was very real in my life, and just thinking about how it used to be for me is exhausting. It was fear motivated, it was certainty motivated, which only fed the OCD. Worst of all, it crushed my self authority and actual real ability to have real faith. As someone once told me, fear isn't the opposite of faith, certainty is. I was constantly looking outside myself for guidance. I had no self trust. I figured that somewhere in the church, in authority, in the scriptures, there must be an answer to every question. And I studied hard. So, in my personal direction, I now classify myself as an omnist, someone who believes that all religions have truth, but none have the full and entire truth. So, while I still hear wisdom from pulpits or yogis or sages, I now know from my own experience that thing that religious OCD or scrupulosity was blocking me from before. That it comes down to me to have the experience with God, which you can call universe, frequency, source, I'll take them all, but to know what's what. And I find the answer from within myself. In fact, one of my personal strong opinions is that religion should only serve as a guide to help people learn how to get answers from God themselves, not ever to tell them what to do or not to do, how to eat, pray, live, etc. And if there was a religion like that, could it sit with the discomfort of different people getting different answers? Hmm, food for thought. One of the most healing paradigm shifts I had was when I heard release the need to control the outcome. That taught me more about faith and surrender to God than anything I had learned before. And yoga helped me to process things physically, mentally, emotionally, so that my mind could release the need to control the outcome. This comes even with religion. It would be easy to attach the OCD to religion and how I think it should be run. And I just said I have a strong opinion about it, but in the end, I can have a strong opinion and still release the need to control how religions should act. That surrender is my new peace. It is not my job to control how the world turns, and trying to would only cause me more stress. I can do what I feel passionate about and still be at peace, knowing that if it doesn't turn out how I prefer, it's all still going to work out. And it's okay for me to be at peace. So, how did Kundalini Yoga help me with OCD? Here's 6 reasons why and the tools involved. Number 1, Kundalini Yoga regulates the nervous systems, balances the vagus nerve. Kundalini Yoga heavily uses a lot of breath work or pranayama, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system. That calms the fear and fight or flight response that fuels OCD patterns. Breath patterns like long, deep breathing or alternate nostril breathing help restore balance. As is taught in yoga training, the breath controls the mind and the mind controls the body. So when you consciously control your breath, then you begin to control your mind. Number 2, Kundalini Yoga rewires thought patterns. OCD involves repetitive, intrusive thoughts and compulsive loops, and Kundalini Kriyas and meditations often include mantra repetition and eye focus called drishti, and specific mudras or hand positions, and those direct the massive amounts of mental energy, helping to break those mental loops and train the brain's focus to be beneficial. The very practice itself can help clear out the subconscious in a way that allows for new thought patterns, not controlled by past triggers, traumas, and habits. All these tools not only direct mental thought and energy, but literally work the brain to clear the subconscious and put you in control instead of the mind. The mind is a terrible master, but a powerful servant. Number 3, Kundalini Yoga strengthens the navel center or third chakra. Many Kriyas and Kundalini Yoga work the navi or navel center, which is linked to personal power, discipline, decision making, and confidence. A strong navel supports self trust and emotional regulation. This is key in reducing the anxiety and compulsions of OCD. Trust and surrender help stop the fear based motivations, either from OCD or anything else. Number 4, Kundalini Yoga increases self-awareness without judgment. OCD often thrives on shame, fear, and hyper self-monitoring and judgment. Kundalini Yoga, as well as most yogic philosophy, practices increasing neutral mind awareness. It's a yogic mental state where you observe without reacting, judging, or even creating an opinion. This helps us to witness intrusive thoughts without feeling the fear, urgency, or even attaching ourselves to it. Number 5, Kundalini Yoga promotes spiritual connection and meaning. At its core, Kundalini Yoga connects the practitioner to a higher sense of self, truth, or consciousness. For many with OCD, intrusive thoughts are actually ego driven and thus fear based. We'll go deeper into that in a minute. Practices like chanting Satnam, which is truth is my identity, or my name is truth, I am in my truth, reinforce a deeper, more anchored, and positive self conception beyond the mental chatter. Number 6, Kundalini Yoga creates ritual and safe repetition. Many with OCD crave structure and repetition, and Kundalini offers healthy, intentional rituals through the kriyas, or like the practices and the movements, giving the mind and body a safe outlet for repetitive behavior, but with uplifting results, not distress, such as a balanced nervous system and cleaning out the subconscious. An important note, Kundalini Yoga is not a replacement for professional mental health treatment for OCD, but it can be a powerful complementary practice. Many people find it enhances therapy, increases emotional resilience, and reduces symptom intensity over time. I will add, though, that Kundalini Yoga includes repetitive movements, chanting, breath work, and that for someone with strong OCD, they may blur that line between spiritual practice and compulsive behavior, and some people could become compulsive about their yoga. Still, on the other hand, again, that being said, this is not just a spiritual practice. This is an ancient technology of awareness. And by doing it, you will still work the issues of the body, mind, and psyche, regardless of motivations or OCD, because it's still going to be healing because it's just how it works. I went through my own period right after I got started with teacher training where I felt like I had to do everything perfectly and I was getting a little anal and OCD about it. But the practice was still healing for me. And it taught me to release that and to start practicing imperfectly. And now I have a beautiful balance and I don't struggle with that. Now, connecting this to yogic tradition, spirituality, or even psychology, OCD can have strong connections to the ego. I noticed this in my further study of the ego because the ego has a very strong need for control and certainty as well. But I want to clarify something. There is a positive and negative ego. The negative ego is the fear motivated insecurity of self, characterized by negative self perception, self doubt, and a lack of confidence or self love. Because of this, it believes that it has to be better than others to see the proof outside of themselves that they are worthy. Comparison, blaming, victimhood are all common qualities. The extreme embodiment of the negative ego would look like narcissism with a huge lack of empathy, no understanding of the connection between all people, all things. The positive ego is the sense of self. When you say, I'm proud of the work I did, that's positive ego. It's the identity that is you, that differentiates yourself from others, that can list the qualities and skills, likes and dislikes that you embody. It's what makes you you. When this ego is strong, it understands that each person has their own skills and qualities, and them having theirs doesn't take away from you having yours. It's confident and easily makes decisions that are healthy for you. The positive ego is willing to learn and to trust. It loves deeply and easily because it knows that it comes from love, and your true self is love. Often, this becomes strong in a person when they actually experience and embody their own truth and the understanding that we are all connected. In Sanskrit, this would be Hami Hum Brahmam. We are one, or we are God. We can't be we if I'm still trying to be you, be your authentic self. What if we let OCD triggers be a reminder that what we're feeling is the fear and stress of uncertainty, but that we can step into the positive ego or even neutral mind and practice trust, true self? The triggers are an invitation to reconnect with your soul and your truth. Now, the relationship between OCD and ego can be subtle but profound, especially when looked at you through a yogic, psychological, or even spiritual lens. And here's a breakdown of the connection. So let's talk about this from a Sikh perspective first. The negative ego is also known as Haumai, the ego consciousness that separates you from the infinite self. So the OCD is Haumai on overdrive. I could be pronouncing that wrong, and if I am, I am sorry. It's actually the ego's attempt to fix discomfort through action, repetition, image, or mental control. The positive ego is called Siraj. This is the radiant self that sees challenge as part of the journey, not a threat to worth or identity. True self reigns here in truth and surrender. Even if there is fear, it is abated by trust. So, OCD thrives in the negative ego or strong haumai, and that's the part of the mind that demands certainty, control, and safety at all costs, but it also disconnects us from the true self. Healing begins when the positive ego or Siraj is strengthened, restoring trust in the self, tolerance for uncertainty, and freedom from the compulsive loop, trusting in the journey and knowing deeply that the circumstances don't affect our value because the true self's value cannot be altered. It's always vast and infinite. Ahankara comes from Sanskrit. It's a core concept in Hindu, yogic, and Samkhya philosophy. What is Ahankara? Sanskrit meaning is I maker. Aham meaning I, and kara meaning maker or doer. It's the function of the mind that creates a sense of I or identity or the ego. Basically, a label maker. I am a business person. I am attractive. I am a good person. I'm a bad person. I'm a sensitive person. I am a failure. I am fill in the blank. It's not necessarily bad, but in most spiritual contexts, it refers to the false self, the identity that gets attached to roles, thoughts, status, and separation from the true self or Atman. In yogic philosophy, ahankara is just one of the four parts of the mind. It's the ego function that says, this is me, but often incorrectly. Ahankara is what mistakes the mind, thoughts, and emotions as the self rather than realizing the deeper self or the Atman, the soul. Ahankara corresponds to what we might call the negative ego in modern or Western spiritual language. It's the construct that fears disillusion, seeks control, and resists the unknown. The spiritual journey is often about transcending ahankara, not destroying it, but returning it to its proper place as a tool, not the master. Here's a simple exercise of this transcendence from motivational speaker Bob Proctor.
So I started to study myself. I found most people don't know who they are. They really don't.
What do you mean? I mean, I know my name, I know my age, I know where I live.
Yeah, that's not
what
you,
else
though.
is there?
You know, that's
what
just
size,
it. If you ask the
clothes
average person who they are, they'll give you their name. They'll say, I'm Bob Proctor, but I'm not. Bob and Proctor are two words. My parents give them to me. They're called names, but it's not me. It's my name. Then somebody will say, well, this is me, but this isn't me either. It's my body. Like, you never phone down here to the studio and say, body won't be in today. It's sick.
Okay.
You know, we don't say am hand or am leg. It's my hand, my leg, my body, my name. Who am I? Well, that's an interesting question. Mm-hmm. And I believe if a person will start to study that and look for the answer, they'll find it. See, I think we live simultaneously on three planes of understanding. We're spiritual creatures, we have an intellect, and we live in physical bodies.
Okay.
But because we lack awareness or understanding of who we are, we're totally locked into a physical world, and we let things outside of us control us. 95% of the population are reacting to life. They're not really living at all.
Thank you, Bob. I would agree. We're not really living because we're outside ourselves rather than living from the inside, and very often living a false self, motivated by fears, triggers, and need for control, which, funnily enough, control is an illusion. So what are we really chasing? Illusion, or as the yogis call it, Maya. And as Bob said, these things are labels. I am not my name. I am something further than that. I am not my body. I am something further than that. I am a spiritual creature and I have intellect and I have a physical body, but what is I that has a physical body? All right. So, what are some correlations of the negative ego to OCD? Well, here are four. One, negative ego seeks control. OCD is a control mechanism. The negative ego in both Western psychology and yogic philosophy is often associated with the part of the self that wants to protect, control, and preserve identity, but out of fear, and usually for the wrong motivations, like perfectionism. OCD behaviors, whether intrusive thoughts or compulsions, are typically attempts to regain a sense of control in an uncertain world. Example, if I check the stove 5 times, I'll be safe. Part of the ego-driven need for certainty, control, and safety also hear the I maker in there. The illusion being that we can control every outcome to prevent disappointment or pain or stress. But that's still an illusion of control. We can't, for total certainty, keep it from happening. But the repeated task appeases the illusion of control. Number 2, ego fears uncertainty, and OCD amplifies it. OCD thrives in uncertainty. The ego, especially in its negative form, ahankara, is terrified of what it can't define or control. OCD compulsions are a way to neutralize uncertainty, even if irrational. The ego voice says, you must be sure. And the OCD response would be, check again, just in case, and even if it makes you late. Number 3, ego and identity attachment. OCD often attaches to a person's deepest fears about who they are or might become. Intrusive thoughts like, what if I'm dangerous? Or what if I'm a bad person? Or what if I'm at fault? Stem from ego's desperate need to maintain a specific self-image, which I feel reflects back to tribal living, not wanting to be kicked out of the village. Again, a need for safety for something we can't control, such as the decisions or opinions of others. But we sure try. Ego says, I must appear good, moral, and kind. And OCD says, prove it again and again and again. Number 4, spiritual ego and moral perfectionism. There's often a need to appear better than we feel we actually are. And in OCD, it shows up in relationships, workplace, and even religion or spiritual communities. In the religious communities, OCD can appear as scrupulosity, a hyper focus on being pure, perfect, righteous, or enlightened. Typically motivated by the fear and belief of not being good enough, there's a persistent need to prove one's worth. Overly obsessive rule following, thought control, constant self flagellation, either physically or mentally, and sometimes a compulsive need to confess are just a short list of symptoms, which is typically also accompanied by depression and/or anxiety. Another way this can show up is stemming from the ego's desire to appear spiritually advanced rather than authentically connected. Unfortunately, this is reinforced by praise and elevation of status in religious groups. Have you heard the Zen Buddhist saying, before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. Even with real enlightenment, it doesn't always mean that you'll now be a spiritual guru. Often it means you get to live in peace and true harmony with self and surroundings, but life may look exactly the same on the outside. Number 5, yogic perspective. The ego is meant to serve the soul, not control it. In Kundalini yoga and other spiritual traditions, like we talked about, the ego as a whole is not bad, but when it runs the show unchecked, the negative ego creates mental suffering and fear loops, hallmarks of OCD, right? Kundalini approach says strengthen the neutral mind so the ego becomes a tool, not a tyrant. The OCD healing path, cultivate your witness consciousness, and that helps to gradually let go of patterns and compulsive control. So in summary, OCD tries to reduce stress via control. The negative ego tries to preserve identity via control. OCD struggles with uncertainty. Negative ego fears uncertainty and vulnerability. OCD is driven by fear and what if. Negative ego is driven by fear of annihilation or judgment. OCD is repetitive mental loops. Negative ego, repetitive fear motivators. Even if it's not OCD, these patterns can still show up in just about anybody. And I invite you to press pause for a moment to give you the opportunity to reflect. Where do you see this in your own life? Here are some really reflective questions if you feel you may be struggling with OCD, but they're really great for anyone. Number 1, ask yourself, what do I believe would happen if I didn't follow my compulsion or ritual? Ask yourself, is this thought really mine or just a thing passing through me? Ask yourself, am I acting from fear or from trust in my deeper self? Ask yourself, where am I trying to control the uncontrollable in my life? Ask yourself, What part of me feels threatened if I don't get this perfect? Ask yourself, can I witness the urge rather than obey it? Ask yourself, what would my highest self do in this moment of discomfort? Okay. I believe that all real healing comes from paradigm shifting. So before I wrap up, I want to share some statements and affirmations. Some of them have really helped me with OCD and paradigm shifting in my own healing journey. Not all of them will be helpful for everyone, but find the ones that feel like they really resonate with you and leave the rest. Here we go. My thoughts do not define me. Good enough is actually enough. This too shall pass. When the time is on you, start and the pressure will be off. This helped me to stop procrastinating or quitting, which was one of my compulsions. If you've only got 80% today and you give all 80%, that's 100% effort. I want to get comfortable being uncomfortable. My good friend Laura told me this when I asked her why she wanted to start running and practicing for a marathon. Sit with your pain, cradle it close, lean in and listen, take it slow. From the song Cradle It Close from Fia. It's safe to pause. Relief is not the same as healing. Done is better than perfect. This helped me to realize I could finish something imperfectly and it was still good. I don't need to be certain to be okay. Satnam. It is a Kundalini yoga mantra and greeting, meaning I am my true self and it is whole and divine, true name. I am truth. I am still loved and lovable despite my obsessions and compulsions. I love and accept all parts of me. It's okay if I can't do it all. Resting is not a waste of time. It's an investment in well-being by Adam Grant. No effort is wasted. All right. Well, thank you for joining me in this journey. In this episode, we explored OCD through the lens of ego, control, and yogic philosophy, went into a deep dive around the positive ego and the negative ego. And, in this episode, I tried to reframe OCD a bit as an invitation to awaken from the fear and reconnect with the self and positive ego and build trust from the inside out. Maybe we can start looking at it as a trigger to remember instead of a trigger to obsess. If you would like a printout of these affirmations I gave you, you can go to my new website, consciouswithcrystal.com, and get it there. For more information or resources on OCD, you can visit treatmyocd.com. I don't personally know it very well, but I did try their OCD quiz on the website and thought that was pretty useful. I'm currently looking for people to join me on the podcast who have experienced scrupulosity. So please reach out via email if you're interested in telling some of your story. You can email it at consciousandcuriouswithcrystal@gmail.com or DM me on Instagram. If this spoke to you and you'd like to see more from me, check out my Instagram or my YouTube channel, which I just revived. And you can search Crystal Schultz or at Conscious with Crystal on YouTube to find it there. Thank you so much for listening. I invite you to stay conscious and curious, and don't forget to subscribe to hear new episodes. And as always, please share this with someone who you think might need it. Thank you for listening and take care. Satnam.